Testing. We've got about a minute left here, but we can go ahead and start getting into it. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out to the first panel on the last day of the con. I know I've gotten like 4 hours of sleep the past 2 nights in a row. You guys are all probably the same. Appreciate you being here. I've actually got a co-panelist, and he's not here yet. Not sure where he is, but I'll just give the presentation by myself until he gets here. So today we are here to talk about VTubers, both the culture and the business behind them. Now I want to start out just by gauging the room. Is there anyone in the room who doesn't already know what a VTuber is? All right, so everyone's at least a little familiar with them. How many people in here watch VTubers often already? Okay, most of the people in the room, not everyone. And then how many people were at the VTuber panel and main events yesterday? Okay, a couple people. So that panel yesterday was interesting. I went to it just to see what they were doing. This panel is going to be more talking from a viewer's perspective about what VTubers are, why people watch them. You know, a lot of people know what they are, but some people don't understand what the appeal is. So kind of talking about what they are and then, what really goes into the industry behind them, once again from an audience perspective. So to start out, what is a VTuber? You guys already know, but it stands for virtual YouTuber, and so they're not just on YouTube, they're on YouTube, Twitch, any website that allows live streaming. Usually they're live. Some VTubers do make pre-recorded content as well, and the main thing that makes them a VTuber is just that they're using virtual avatars for streaming rather than their own face. So there's someone on YouTube doing this, and someone on Twitch, just to give an example. Over on YouTube, I actually pulled the screenshot the other day, and if you look at the super chats in the chat, they're all $100 super chats. I actually thought I got a YouTube bug, and I went back to get the screenshot again, because if you go into YouTube playback for old streams, sometimes if you just skip to a certain point, it'll only show the larger donations. So I went back, I went like 10 minutes before and watched the entire thing, and you know, she was just getting really big donations that day. So that's, you know, one of the reasons some people are interested in getting into VTubing is to make money, but obviously it can also be a hobby if you're just getting into it. So what is it that VTubers do if you're actually wanting to be a VTuber, or if you're wanting to watch them? They do a lot of the same things that IRL streamers do, and explaining VTubers to people who are getting into them for the first time. You know, you just start with that basic understanding of, do you know what a streamer is? You know, they're gaming. Sometimes they just chat with their audience. They're singing a lot of the time with VTubers. There's kind of an overlap. You know, people in Japanese culture, they like karaoke and things like that, so we like to watch VTubers do that. They can also get creative. They can do things like cooking and other things. My co-panelist has one that he likes to watch that's cooking-centric indie VTuber. But yeah, really, if you're a VTuber, you can do theoretically most of the same things an IRL streamer can do. You've got some extra limitations because you can't always show your entire body. But then you've also got some things that you can do a little bit easier if you're a VTuber in terms of changing up your location and things like that when it's all just virtual. One of the other things that's nice about VTubers as opposed to actual IRL streamers is that a lot of the times they have characters that they are sort of playing. And some people enjoy the character aspect more than others. You know, there are some VTubers out there who they are semi-anonymous, and they don't really acknowledge their IRL personality. They just, when they go to stream as a VTuber, they are playing this character. And a lot of VTubers, like they talked about at the panel yesterday, they enjoy getting into that mindset of they're kind of in a different space, they're being who they want to be as a VTuber. As an audience member, you can also appreciate that if you want to watch a character who's not necessarily going to be always talking about all the latest problems in the real world or things like that. These characters can be a little bit more lighthearted. A lot of times characters have physical traits that identify them. You've got like the blank VTuber, you've got different VTubers that try to find niches, so they might be a certain animal that no other VTuber has done yet. I've heard about a couple of moth VTubers, for instance, and like that's an insect you wouldn't necessarily think of if you're just trying to think, oh, what would be a cute avatar I can use to stream? Oh, a moth. But apparently multiple people did. But that helps set them apart because now the first person who did that is the moth VTuber, and then you remember that even if you don't remember their name. Another thing about the characters, they can have sort of personality traits, quirks, and those can be sort of imported from the real personality. They can be sort of made up. A lot of times it's sort of in the middle. VTubers, when they're playing characters, they tend to take aspects of their IRL personality and they sort of exaggerate those aspects into something that's more entertaining, I guess. And then the characters can also sort of have backstory. Different people do different things with this. A lot of times VTubers will start off with a sort of backstory just to introduce their audience to their personality and their characters. But then as time goes on and they're streaming, they sort of adjust the backstory to fit whatever it is that they do during their streams. So like I mentioned, part of the reason you might want to be a VTuber, I've talked to some people who want to get into streaming, but they don't want to have their face on the internet. And you can stream without a face cam at all, but then people aren't connected to you quite as much. So it can be helpful to have an avatar just to show expressions, and that way you can sort of get out there without having to put yourself out there in terms of your actual face and identity. Now, established creators are often recognized. If you look at the bigger VTubing companies, which we'll get into in a couple minutes, they are often recognized in terms of people see previous work, they identify them by their voice. A lot of times the YouTube algorithm, if they're a big enough creator, once a couple people figure out who it is and they start going back and forth between the IRL person's channel and then the VTuber channel, YouTube will start recommending you videos from one if you're watching the other, so that can sort of work around the anonymity thing, which isn't always desired. But another thing to keep in mind if you are doing this yourself, if you're going to sign up on Twitch or YouTube, if you're expecting to make revenue, you will probably need to give your IRL identity to a company at some point. Now, obviously, those companies, Twitch and YouTube, they're pretty secure in terms of they try not to leak data for their users. But if you're actually wanting to be completely anonymous, then you probably won't be able to make money doing it. Yeah, it's sort of a spectrum in terms of that. So the next couple slides, my co-panelist who's not here was supposed to present, but I know a little bit about them. The first sort of VTuber adjacent media, they were kind of what we call PNG tubers today, which if you've heard that term, it's a VTuber who doesn't have an animated model, they just have a static sprite, because it's a lot cheaper to draw one image than to have to rig it and everything. So the first sort of VTuber-like people online, they were mostly PNGs with voiceover, and they were really more like short, low-budget animations. They weren't necessarily streaming, but they were drawing a couple pictures or commissioning a couple pictures and then using those for a lot of content over time. And they weren't really, they weren't similar to current VTubers, once again, because they weren't always streaming long form like a lot of current VTubers do. Another sort of primitive type of VTuber in terms of the timeline was Yamato. Once again, I learned about this from my co-panelist, but this was a blogger who started filming vlogs, and she would replace herself in post with an avatar. So this wasn't VTubers streaming, and they weren't doing the same things that people do today when they're doing 3D VTubing. Today, if you're going to do that, you'd probably be wearing some kind of motion capture suit. I think this was a lot more primitive. Like I said, they were basically going in and sort of covering up the real person with an avatar in post-production. It took a long time, so it sort of is similar to VTubing in that it replaced the person with an avatar, but production-wise, it was much more complicated than what people normally do today. In terms of modern-day VTubers, some of the early ones that you might have heard of, Kizuna AI was one of the, or Kizuna AI, was the first sort of modern style VTuber that came out, and she debuted in November 2016. So she was debuted by a company called Activate, and their goal with her was to create an idol who was sort of ageless or timeless. A lot of idols in Japan, age is sort of a factor in that, and so when they get too old, they have to stop. Their original idea with Kizuna AI was, let's make an idol that people can connect with, and then she never ages because it's an avatar. Obviously, the voice behind it's still going to age, so eventually you need to make a decision in terms of, are you going to switch voice actors out, or are they going to stop? In Kizuna AI's case, they actually did technically retire her or graduate her a couple years ago, and she has, let's see here, my notes are a little bit jumbled here. So she has 993 pre-recorded videos on her YouTube channel right now and 112 live stream archives. So Kizuna AI was very much a pre-recorded video type of VTuber. Most of her content was, she was recording things in advance, they were editing them. So if you're doing pre-recorded videos, you have that opportunity to go back, you don't have to do everything in one take. If you don't like something, you can cut it out, that kind of thing. And yeah, even though they technically graduated her a few years ago, like I said, she's been doing like one video a year or one video every 6 months, like very slow. She's graduated but not actually disappeared. And then one of the other very early VTubers was Tokino Sora, and she was the first VTuber with an agency called Hololive. So let's see here. She debuted in September 2017, so about a year after Kizuna AI. Her design is sort of inspired by, you can see they look kind of similar, and they've acknowledged that. They've actually done videos on each other's channels, sort of impersonating each other before as a joke. And yeah, Sora also started out doing similar content to Kizuna AI. Sora started out doing sort of vlog-style videos where she was sitting down or standing up and talking to her audience about things, asking for comments, and then responding to them in the next video. But then HoloLive, especially with Sora, they kind of evolved over time to much more live streaming. Part of the reason why they did that is because live streaming, in terms of how much money you're spending per hour of content, is a lot cheaper. Because you don't need to spend time editing, you don't need to spend time in post. Obviously, some more time may need to be spent in preparation because you don't want your live stream to go wrong. But yeah, Sora kind of led HoloLive into this new era of VTubers that most people are familiar with today. And just to illustrate that, she currently, as of last month, she had 174 pre-recorded uploads and 652 live stream archives on her channel. So her channel shows she's done a lot more streams than live content. So yeah, Kizuna AI was the first big VTuber in the sense of that word, virtual YouTuber, and then Sora brought that over once again to live streaming, where you can have more spontaneous audience interaction as well as another advantage to live streaming. You don't have to wait until the next video to actually respond, which is another reason people like watching VTubers a lot. So if you're going to get into VTubers, the big two companies that you're probably going to hear about are HoloLive and Nijisanji. And HoloLive is owned by a Japanese company called Cover Corporation. Nijisanji is owned by a Japanese corporation called Anycolor. And let's see here. So HoloLive currently has 75 active members, plus a couple that have left over the years. And the VTuber with the most subscribers in the world on YouTube is named Garagura, and she is a part of HoloLive's English branch. She's part of HoloLive, so they have that title of most subscribed persons with them. Now, out of everyone in HoloLive, only 10 of their members are English. They also have 9 Indonesian talents, and they speak Indonesian, Japanese, and English, so they've got a really global audience. And then the rest of their talents are Japanese. The other big name, like I said, Nijisanji. Niji stands for, Niji means rainbow in Japanese, so the umbrella company, Anycolor, it's sort of a reference to that name. Nijisanji's first generation of talents debuted in February 2018. Nijisanji was about half a year after Sora from HoloLive, so HoloLive has been around a little bit longer. Today, Nijisanji has 179 talents, so they've got over twice as many talents as HoloLive. They tend to debut them a lot quicker, and they debut bigger groups of them at the same time. They go for a little more quantity. And Nijisanji holds a VTuber called Kazuha, who is the most subscribed male VTuber in the world, so they have that title. Related to that, Cover Corporation has another subunit called Holo Stars, and it's sort of a male branch of HoloLive. Sometimes they treat them all as one sort of HoloLive entity, but sometimes they separate out the Holo Stars and HoloLive by gender. So HoloLive is technically all girls and Holo Stars is all guys, in terms of the characters they're playing at least. But they do interact, they both appear in promotional materials together. Nijisanji also splits up the male and female groups. When they debut a group, typically it will be all male or all female that they're debuting at the same time. Once again, the characters they're playing, not necessarily the actors behind them. But they just put them all under the same name. They don't have a separate official name for their male branch. So for each of these, I've got a pretty recent sort of family photo for each of them. Interesting, the HoloLive one, they're all just sort of in a jumble, and then Nijisanji, looks like they're on risers at a school event or something, much more organized. I don't know if that actually reflects their talents or not. I watch a lot more HoloLive myself. My absent co-panelist watches more Nijisanji, so yeah. Both of these companies are very large. With all of HoloLive's talents combined, they have over 70 million YouTube subscribers. And Nijisanji has over 60 million with all of their talents combined. So HoloLive is ahead by a tiny bit in terms of total subscribers. Obviously, I live here in the United States, and I've heard that Nijisanji is actually more popular over in Japan, but HoloLive has a more popular global audience. So yeah, Anycolor and Nijisanji, it's interesting, they are both listed on or at least Nijisanji is currently listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. HoloLive was approved to be listed just within the last month or two. They're not actually on there yet, but they did get their approval to go on there. So both of these are very large. There's a lot of money going into them now, public investment going into some of these larger companies. And there are a number of smaller companies as well. And if you're going to watch VTubers or you try to be a VTuber, it's important to keep in mind that it's not just the big companies, obviously. You don't even need a company at all. I'll get into indie VTubers in a couple slides, but you know, there are these 5 and many more sort of smaller companies, and you'll hear these groups. A lot of times these companies start out with just a group of VTubers who are maybe already streaming, or they want to start streaming together, they're friends, and they want to sort of support each other and do that together. So they'll form a company, or they'll approach one together. Of course, some companies have disappeared over the years. The logos on the screen right here are defunct companies. That large logo there, Sundaria, they were the first Western VTuber company. So they were founded in California and headquartered there. They debuted the first talent in June 2020. I've heard from my co-panelists that they worked well with their talents, but they suffered from low funds. They had a little bit of mismanagement in terms of their stores. Both online and when they went to conventions, they would run out of merchandise very quickly, so sometimes they were not able to make all the money back that they were trying to in terms of their ventures, and so they went under eventually. Now, in terms of defunct companies, there's also defunct subsidiaries or branches of other companies. Hololive, for instance, like I said, they've got their main Japanese branch, an English branch, and their Indonesian branch. They also had a Chinese branch a few years ago, and they ended up having to close their Chinese branch because political issues with that were basically affecting the rest of their branches. People from the audiences were not able to get along, and they decided the best thing financially was to just pull out of China. But yeah, there are companies that come and go. And like I said, you don't need to be part of a company to VTube. Risk TV on the right here, this is one of the VTubers that was at that panel and main events yesterday. On the left, a VTuber that I personally know online, Cowboy Kiwami. You can just go on, and if you're able to get an avatar and rig it, and I'll show you some of the technology in a few slides. But you can really get started pretty cheap and pretty easily, and you don't need anyone's permission to do it, obviously, if you're going to be an independent VTuber. Yeah, you can just get online and start streaming, and you can do really whatever you want. You can game, you can draw, or anything else. These are a few popular indie VTubers that you might hear of. Shy Lily is probably the most well-known indie VTuber that's not technically associated with any company. She has, she has a million followers. I got this information from my co-panelist, and she has collabed with somebody called GamerSubs. I don't know who that is personally. The next one over is Onigiri. She's a cooking VTuber, and cooking is an interesting thing to do as a VTuber because food pretty much has to be, you know, if you're cooking IRL, you're not going to have virtual food tracking what you're doing. You're going to have to show your actual food. And so sometimes these VTubers will actually sort of put on gloves and have a camera pointing at their food, but then they still have their face avatar on the side, and they try not to show their face in the video. So it's a really interesting setup that kind of really pushes the line in terms of, you know, keeping it virtual or not. Let's see, so we've got Shixto, might be how that's pronounced, that third one from the left. He is the most popular indie male VTuber. He's got 1 million Twitch followers. And then on the right here, we've got Shigure Ui. And she is an artist that became a VTuber. That's a common thing that happens because artists, they're able to draw their own avatars, and so half the cost of startup, they've already got covered because they can just draw for themselves instead of commissioning. She also created the design for Subaru and Hololive. So a lot of people have heard of her through Hololive. She's done collaborations with people from both Hololive and Nijisanji. And that brings up, just because you start as an independent or you are an independent VTuber, doesn't mean you can't interact with the people in the big companies. You know, they've got their communities and they're sort of in groups, but you know, they all sort of collab with each other when they want to. So getting into sort of the technology behind it, how does it actually work? And I was really, as a tech person myself, I was sort of most interested in the technology side when I started learning about VTubers. So the best way to understand how VTubing works, first of all, take how regular streaming works. You've got yourself, you've got a camera pointed at yourself, that's going into some software like OBS Studio that's gonna, you know, put that on the screen, add titles on top of it, and then you're gonna stream out from that software to YouTube or Twitch or whatever other website you want to. So streaming as a VTuber, exact same thing, you're just adding an extra step in the middle. Which is after your camera, you're going to convert that into, somehow you're going to convert that into a virtual avatar. It's not necessarily using a camera, it can use other equipment, but you're really just inserting an extra step into the regular streaming process. You can separate out different computers, different devices if you want to. You don't have to. There's very low cost solutions that you can sort of do everything on one computer. if you need to. But and this slide, this is a chart I found online that I found very accurate and also kind of obvious. I was surprised somebody made a chart showing this. Basically what this chart says, it's got a lot of words. What it says is if you spend more money, you got more capability. You can do more the more you spend. If you don't spend more money, you can still stream, but your functionality will be lower. So some of the common software you'll hear about in VTubing, Live2D is a big name in VTubing, and the name of the program is Live2D Cubism. Live2D is the company itself that makes this program. People just call it the shorthand. And this is the software that you actually use to rig up your model. So if you've got a static image, you can actually bring it into Live2D, and then you basically tell it where it's going to fold, where it's going to stretch, when it's actually animating that, so that you can then move around. So Live2D typically isn't going to actually be moving things around for you in real time. That's what you use to set up the avatar, and then you use other programs that work with Live2D models. One of those programs is called VTube Studio. This is one of the bigger ones. And so you would import your Live2D model into VTube Studio, and this would take care of actually mapping your real-time expressions onto your model for you. This isn't the only option for the mapping. VUP, or Virtual Up, is another option for that. So it's the exact same thing. You import your model from another program, and then it will map your expressions onto that model. And there's even cheaper ones and lesser known ones. If you go on Steam and just search VTuber software, there's tons of low budget software out there. Most of these are free to use, at least. VTube Studio, you can use it for free with a watermark. You have to pay, I think it's $20 to get rid of the watermark. But it's not even that expensive to begin with. But then, yeah, if you really can't even afford that and you don't want the watermark, there are very, very cheap options out there, and you can find them quite easily. So I have a tech demo semi-prepared here. I am just going to see if I can get this laptop to connect to my phone's hotspot here. And if it doesn't, we might have to skip the demo for now, unless, does anybody in the audience have an iPhone with data tethering and want to try mapping your face? You do? Do you want to come up and help with this?
Sure. So what app do you have on your phone to do this?
So I'm going to be showing VTube Studio. So we're going to use that. And if the person with the iPhone, if you can go on the App Store real quick and download VTube Studio, you can come up here, while you're doing it. You can sit in my co-panelist chair. He lost the right to it, I guess. But yeah, VTube Studio, how it works, it actually can just use, I don't have the slideshow up there anymore. Start that. VTube Studio can use your webcam, like I said. If you just want to use the computer, you don't need a phone to do this. I'm using a computer with Linux on it, which is a little bit more complicated than if you've got Windows or Mac, so it won't detect the webcam on this computer because I'm running it through an emulation layer. But it can use a webcam. It can also use a phone for better tracking. One of the reasons why iPhones are great, this is actually good because both of my phones here that I've got, I brought a backup, but neither of them are working. But those are both Android. iPhones have ARKit, which is sort of an augmented reality feature that lets you, it tracks your eyes and just expressions in general a lot more accurately than you can get with just regular cameras, and that's why people tend to use phones. Yeah, that's the one. Thank you so much for helping with this. Let me know whenever you've got the hotspot started, and I'll connect to that. Let's try it out here. That one?
Yep.
What's the... Is anybody in here a VTuber yourself already? A couple? Okay, cool. How long have you guys been doing it?
A month.
Okay.
About a year.
Nice. Oh, I don't know if this is, I think the problem here is the computer and not the phone. I've actually got a backup computer as well. Okay. I've got a few more slides after this, so if this doesn't work, we can just move on, but I thought it would be cool to show you guys the software, so I'm just going to try to get that going here. All right. Well, these computers are not liking Wi-Fi this morning. I think maybe we'll move on for now, and then if people want to stick around after we're done with the PowerPoint, we can keep trying to get the tech working. But basically how this works, you're going to have a phone or a webcam that's going to look at your face. It's going to map your basic expressions onto the model on the screen. So when you blink, it's going to blink for you. When you turn left or right, it's going to get that sort of thing. Now, when you're using these 2D programs with live 2D models, typically you're not going to have things like full arm movement. If you want to raise your arms or if you want to have very exaggerated expressions, a lot of times those things you'll actually map to keys on your keyboard so they're manually triggered. So if you want to have a throwing your arms up expression, you hit a key on the keyboard, it throws your arms up, and then you hit another key to put them back down to your standard pose. And Live 2D is really good at sort of mixing different expressions together, so while you're in that hands up expression, it will still be tracking your face and sort of mixing that in. So that was what the demo was going to be. Like I said, we'll, I've got this through their public Wi-Fi. It's going to be very slow and iffy. I guess we can see if that's going to work. So I'm going to launch VTube Studio here. I can at least show you the computer side of it. So this is what it's going to look like when you're bringing it up on your own computer. I'm so sorry to bring you up here when this isn't going to work. What's your name?
Angie.
Angie, my new assistant here. So this is just the default VTuber model with VTube Studio. It comes with a couple models. It's 2 girls and then like 3 animals. I tried to get a boy model because I'm a boy and I was planning on doing this myself, but none of the defaults are that. But basically you've got your character here, and you can have multiple characters loaded in there. You can select 2 different backgrounds. But these settings here are where you really choose everything. So when you're going to connect to a phone, the way that I was trying to do it here was actually connecting my phone to this laptop via Wi-Fi. So if you've got them both on the same Wi-Fi network, then it will send that data over the network. You typically only want to do that if you've got a very fast Wi-Fi connection. It's recommended if you can to actually plug in with USB. That only works on Windows or Mac OS. You need to have iTunes installed if you've got an iPhone for that. But yeah, it's going to send that data, and see what else we've got here in the settings. So like I said, there is webcam tracking. Once again, this computer won't do it, but most computers will. So you can go in there and configure that, and it won't be quite as high fidelity as the phone, once again. It'll just be not as accurate, not as expressive. But you can absolutely get started with it that way. And then you've got your virtual webcam configuration. This is the other important one. This is the output from this program. So if you guys are familiar with programs like OBS Studio, programs that you use to send your video to YouTube or Twitch or whatever you're using, normally you go into those programs and you select a physical webcam. This program will give your computer a virtual webcam that's going to display your VTuber. Now if you want to have your VTuber on top of like games or things like that, you can just go and configure like a solid green background in this program, and then you green screen it out in OBS Studio or whatever program you're using for that. And that's how they get those just overlays without a background around the character. And so even though I don't have the face tracking right now, I do have some of the expressions sort of keyed. So I've got, let's see here. So numpad 1, it looks like that's going to put some sparkles in this character's eyes. So that's like an anime thing if you want to be able to do that when you see something that excites you. Let's see. I think the most expressive 2, I've got a happy emotion and then a sad emotion. And so for these expressions, you can go in for every single one and sort of configure what you want it to do for that expression. And once again, anything that you're going to move in VTube Studio needs to be rigged in Live 2D first. So your Live 2D rig is going to limit what you can or can't do once you get to this step. But for the sad expression here, for instance, you just go into the expression editor. The expression editor is back at the top right here. All right, and so for the sad expression, once again, when I hit it, oh, it's not going to hit it while I'm in this mode, but basically you can go and say, okay, when I'm in my sad expression, I want the eyes to no longer shine. Or you can say when I'm in the happy expression, I want them to shine. You can say, let's see, where was the height one that was more? Right here. So this was one that was not in the default configuration. I went and configured this, that when this character, when I put the sad expression on, I want her to sort of slump down. And so, yeah, that's the kind of configuration you can do in terms of the different expressions there. All right, well, yeah, like I said, we'll move on with the PowerPoint, and then anyone who wants to, if you get bored of the troubleshooting, you can leave after the PowerPoint's done. But then if anyone wants to stick around and try to see it in action and try it yourself with the camera, then we can keep going with that later. So what's next for VTubers was the other stuff we were going to cover. VTubers, like I said, right now they do a lot of gaming streams, and it's very cheap for them to do that, very inexpensive. That's the reason why it's sort of proliferated and come out on top in terms of what's the most popular, because you can sit down, someone else has already made the game that you're going to play, so you don't need to come up with material completely from scratch, and you can just sit down and have hours of content generated just by reacting to that. Obviously, some VTubers are still doing vlogs, some VTubers are doing cooking, some VTubers are doing drawing, so you can absolutely do more creative, productive stuff as a VTuber as well. But that's all stuff that's being done now. And then we can look at what might be next for VTubers. I think two of the big ones are AR and VR. And the difference in a VTuber context between those, AR, augmented reality, I think of that as bringing VTubers into the real world, so allowing us, IRL, to sort of interact with them and make it seem sort of real. And then virtual reality, VR, is sort of the opposite direction. It's bringing real people into the VTubers world so that you can interact with them. Some other things here. I've got slides for these. So in terms of augmented reality and VTubers, a couple of current developments, and these are both by HoloLive. Cover Corporation, that founded HoloLive, they actually started as a virtual reality development company. They made games before they were a VTuber company. They pivoted to VTubers and are much more successful doing this. But they've got a lot of experience sort of using these models in a VR and AR context. So they've got an app on the App Store and the Play Store called HoloLive. And that's shown on the left there, and you can sort of interact with a VTuber in the real world. It's still very limited right now, but it will sort of project that VTuber in front of you, and you can see the reactions to different things. And I think as augmented reality headsets maybe become more popular, we're going to see that kind of thing become more capable, where you can actually walk around and have a VTuber following you around and talking to you. Obviously, this would be a programmed thing. The voice actors for that VTuber is not going to be interacting with everybody using that live. They're going to have pre-programmed expressions and phrases they can use. So it is a little bit different, but they're using their VTuber model to do that, sort of connect you, make you feel more connected so you go and watch your streams more later. Another really cool thing, wasn't ready to move on from that slide yet. Oh. Computer's struggling here with the GIFs. So HoloLive last year, they put on their third concert. You can see a GIF of it on the right there. This was really cool. This was an IRL concert. It happened in Japan. Unfortunately, Japan's borders were still closed, so it was basically an exclusive to Japanese people who got to go and see this. But they filled up a stadium with 9,000 people, and they had a concert. This wasn't the first time they did this, but it was the first time they used an AR system to broadcast the concert online, and they actually, as you can see, they were using 3D models, compositing those models onto the stage in real time. So if you're watching this online, it looks like those VTubers are actually standing in front of those people. Now, if you were actually there in that room for that concert, what you were actually watching was a big flat screen on the stage, and then you've got the 3D, the same things the live stream gets. They did have that on the side screens you can sort of see in some of the shots. But they had a live band playing along with these songs, and then they were just playing the voice tracks over that. And theoretically, they're supposed to be live, at least in story. Nobody's actually sure if they're actually performing these dances live or if these were pre-recorded dances and singing. But yeah, I think as display technology progresses, we're about one step away from this being something you can actually see when you're in the concert venue. Currently, like 3D holograms and things don't exist. It's really complicated because you have to have a medium either like water or glass or something to actually make the light appear in front of you. But as we get better 3D technology, you might be able to go and see a VTuber concert and actually have it look as realistic as it did watching the live stream while you're actually there. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. HoloLife's 4th concert is, I think it's about a week from now. Very, very soon that it's coming up. So they normally stream the first part of that on YouTube, so if you haven't seen those, I would go and check it out. HoloLife's concert last year was one of the things that sort of made me realize, like, wow, VTubing is really bigger than just like streamers, playing games. Like it's an industry that is going to evolve entertainment. And then, like I said, the other side of things, virtual reality and VTubers. On the right here, you can see this was a different concert that HoloLive did, and they actually had a concert in VR. So if you wanted to watch this, you could watch it on a computer, but you could also, if you have a VR headset, you could put that on, go into the world, and actually see, in that case, you see the VTuber avatars in 3D in front of you on the stage. And so this is 2 of the talents there sort of interacting in the audience section of that concert. But yeah, I think that's as VR becomes more popular once again. Right now, it might not make sense for a company to put a lot of money into a VR production that not a lot of people are going to be able to join if they don't have VR headsets. But as that becomes more commonplace, we might see more people targeting that medium. And then on the left, we've got a virtual set that a VTuber named Amelia Watson created or commissioned. And so I think it's interesting, we're starting to see sort of TV and movie sets in VR, which is really an extension of VTubers, because what it is people acting in real life, and they're wearing motion capture suits, and then it's translating their movements into these virtual characters in VR, but they don't have to build the sets, they don't have to do their characters' makeup, they just have to put these suits on, and then everything else can be handled digitally. Once again, it can still take money, it can still take time to do, but it can be cheaper than actually building these sets IRL. So yeah, I can sort of lower the barrier to entry for that. And then the last bit of information here that we wanted to cover was VTuber fandom terminologies. Most of you, it sounded like already watched some VTubers, but if you're just getting into it, I wanted to include something that would sort of help people understand what they're looking at when they go in. And so these are some common terms you might hear in VTuber fandoms and what they mean. So Oshi is your favorite VTuber. And so yeah, Oshi Min is what the full expression is, so I think Oshi just means favorite. Or something along those lines. But yeah, TSKR, it means something like thanks for the help, thanks for helping, or TSKR itself is just like that was helpful. People typically use TSKR in the context of like, oh, you did something really cool and it was helpful to me. They're using it very sort of metaphorically because it basically is just a reaction of like, I really liked that. Kusa is a term you might hear. This is sort of a weird one. When I started learning Japanese, I got to this character. I was like, oh, that means laugh. And then I found out it means grass and not laugh. And the reason why that is, if you type LOL, OLOL, it sort of looks like grass in the ground standing out. And so they abbreviated that into their character for grass, Kusa. And then sometimes they also, Japanese people, you'll see they just type a bunch of W's, once again, because it looks similar to LOL to them. It looks like grass. Mama and Papa are terms that have to do with people who are behind a VTuber's model. And so sometimes they refer to the person who drew their model as their mama, and then the person who rigged their model in Live 2D or a program like that as Papa. Now, they don't always use those terms. Sometimes they actually use, if they're both men or both women, they'll use just both mama or both papa. But sometimes they separate them out like that. TT or Tete is slang for, it means precious, innocent, cute, and so if you see something, once again, people will just sort of react, oh, that was so TT, if they see something they thought was cute. Zatsudan is one that you'll hear a lot if you look at like HoloLive streamers or Japanese streamers. Zatsudan means free talk. It's an unscripted conversation, so they're just sitting down and it's basically a just chatting stream. They're not playing a game or they don't have any sort of specific script that they're reading from. Kaigai Nikki is another one you'll hear if you're looking at groups that have Japanese talents and Japanese fans. Kaigai Nikki means overseas brother, overseas brother, and so it's them referring to the Kaigai Nikkis would be us, the people overseas who are enjoying their content. Aka Supa is short for Aka Super Chats, red Super Chats, which are just Super Chats that are $100 or more on YouTube. And so if you hear a VTuber like thanking someone for Akasupas, they're just large super chats, donations that people are making to them. And then anti is a term you might hear, and anti, as you can maybe get from the word, it means hater, but it is a very, very strong term. Typically, like an anti is someone who they're not just like disliking, a VTuber. They are actively harming the community with their spamming or things like that, and so you don't want to be labeled that. So yeah, that is everything that was in here. I am going to put this slideshow up, and I'll have all of the avatars. If you saw any avatars you liked that you didn't already recognize, I'll have all of the names for them in the notes, the ones that weren't already on the screen. But I'll have that up at that URL a little bit later, the one on the left. And then if you want to find more of my stuff, I blog about anime stuff at mountains.moe on the right, and I also make YouTube videos at nerdonthestreet.com doing tech stuff, which you can tell I'm great at since my tech demo didn't quite work today. So yeah, like I said, we'll go back. I guess we'll spend the rest of the time. What time is it? 10:42. Okay, so we've got like 3 minutes. So we don't really have time to do the troubleshooting, but thank you guys once again for coming out. Does anyone have any questions or comments about VTubers? Throughout there, yeah.
Yes, this might be related to the big companies, VTubers. A lot of them borrow from idol communities and by idol fandom.
Absolutely.
In your opinion, do you think how much of the content that the VTubers are kind of choreographed, or how much of them are really the content that try to sell their presence to the world?
Sure. Yeah. So I think that question's about, like Hololive, it's a company that they're sort of founded around this idol culture. And idol culture in Japan, it's going to be people sort of acting pure. A lot of times it has to do with music, but yeah, it's basically asking, how much of that is choreographed in order to achieve that. I think with things like Hololive, they definitely started out more choreographed, where like Sora in the beginning was acting like an idol. And they've got a few talents who still try to do that. Over time, as you're streaming thousands of hours, eventually you're going to stop acting, so choreographed, because the stuff isn't scripted and you can't always sort of be in that headspace. So Hololive has gotten a lot more sort of off the cuff and not quite as idol-ish in the original Japanese sense of the word. But yeah, I'm not sure how much it actually is choreographed. A lot of that you don't know unless you work there. Like I said, with that concert, when I was watching it live, it really impressed me. They were compositing their 3D avatars onto a real live stage in front of a live band. But then some people online pointed out, well, they're not actually performing the song live. The singers, they're probably pre-recorded those dances and those songs. And so if you're like me and you want to sort of enjoy that as it's meant to be enjoyed, you can try to believe that it was live. I still watch that, and they threw in some like off the cuff sort of things in the talking segments between songs that makes it seem like it's live. But yeah, if you want to go and dig in and see like, what would be the easiest way to do this, and did they actually do it live? I'm sure that things are sort of planned out sometimes. Some people have compared VTuber culture to wrestling culture, actually, in that sense. That and there's an overlap in wrestling fans and VTuber fans, because you're kind of watching something and it's staged, but you're going to enjoy it anyway as if it sort of wasn't staged. So yeah. And that is just about time for us. Once again, thank you guys so much for coming out. I hope this was interesting, and hope you enjoy the rest of the convention. Thank you so much for coming up. I'm sorry the demo didn't work, but
Sorry, is this recorded? Yeah.